visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ellen Preckle. The Broad Highway by Geoffrey Farnall. Chapter 42. How Sir Maurice Kept His Word. Night, with the rising moon, and over all things a great quietude, a deep, deep silence. Air close and heavy, without a breath to wake the slumbering trees. An oppressive stillness, which small sounds magnified themselves, and seemed disproportionately loud. And presently, as I went upon my way, I forgot the old man sleeping so peacefully, with the rusty staple clasped to his shrunken breast, and thought only of the proud woman who had given her life into my keeping, and who, henceforth, would walk with me hand in hand upon this broad highway, over rough places and smooth, even unto the end. So I strode on, full of a deep and abiding joy, and with heart that throbbed and hands that trembled, because I knew that she watched and waited for my coming. A sound broke upon the stillness, sudden and sharp, like the snapping of a stick. I stopped and glanced about me, but it had come and gone, lost in the all-pervading calm. And presently, reaching the leafy path that led steeply down into the hollow, I paused a moment to look about me and to listen again, but the deep silence was all unbroken, save for the slumberous song of the brook that stole up to me from the shadows, and I wondered idly what that sudden sound might have been. So I began to descend this leafy path, and went on to meet that which lay waiting for me in the shadows. It was dark here among the trees, for the moon was low as yet, but every now and then she sent a kindly ray through some opening amid the leaves, so that as I descended the path I seemed to be wading through small, limpid pools of radiance. But all at once I stopped, staring at something which lay at the edge of one of those pools, a white claw, a hand, whose fingers, talon-like, had sunk deep and embedded themselves in the turf. And beyond this gleaming hand was an arm, and beyond that again, something that bulked across my path, darker than the shadows. Running forward, I stood looking down at that which lay at my feet, so very still, and stooped suddenly, and turned it over that I might see the face, and, seeing it, started back in shuddering horror, for in those features, hideous with blood, stained and blackened with powder, I recognized my cousin, Sir Maurice Vibart. Then, remembering the stick that had snapped, I wondered no more, but a sudden deadly faintness came upon me, so that I leaned weakly against a tree near by. A rustling of leaves, a shuddering of breath, and though I did not raise my head, I knew that Charmian was there. "Oh, Peter!" she whispered. "Oh, Peter!" And that was all, but, moved by something in her tone, I glanced up. Her eyes were wide and staring, not at me, but at that which lay between us. Her face was pallid, even her lips had lost their color, and she clasped one hand upon her bosom, the other was hidden in the folds of her gown, hidden as I remembered to have seen it once before, but now it struck me with a horrible significance. Wherefore I reached out and caught that hidden hand, and drew the weapon from her nerveless fingers, holding it where the light could play upon it. She started, shivered violently, and covered her eyes, while I, looking down at the pistol in my hand, saw that it had lately been discharged. "He has kept his word," she whispered. "He has kept his word." "Yes, Charmian, he has kept his word." "Oh, Peter!" she moaned, and stretched out her hand towards me, yet she kept her face turned from that which lay across the path between us, and her hands were shaking pitifully. "Peter!" she cried, with a sudden break in her voice, but I went on wiping the soot from the pistol barrel with the end of my neckerchief. Then, all at once, she was beside me, clasping my arm, and she was pleading with me, her words coming in a flood. "No, Peter, no! Oh, God, you do not think it! You can't, you mustn't! I was alone, waiting for you, and the hours passed, and you didn't come, and I was nervous and frightened and full of awful fancies. I thought I heard someone creeping around the cottage. Once I thought someone peered in at the lattice, and once I thought someone tried the door, and so, because I was frightened, Peter, I took that, and held it in my hand, and while I sat there it seemed more than ever that someone was breathing softly outside the door, And so, Peter, I couldn't bear it any more, and opened the lattice and fired. In the air! I swear it was in the air. And I stood there at the open casement, sick with fear, and trying to pray for you, because I knew he had come back to kill you, Peter. And while I prayed I heard another shot, not close but faint, like the snapping of a twig, Peter, and I ran out and oh, Peter, that is all. But you believe, oh, you believe, don't you, Peter?" While she spoke I had slipped the pistol into my pocket, and now I held out my hands to her and drew her near, and gazed into the troubled depths of her eyes. "Charmian," said I, "Charmian, I love you, and God forbid I should ever doubt you any more." So, with a sigh, she sank in my embrace, her arms crept about my neck, and our lips met and clung together. But even then, while I looked upon her beauty, while the contact of her lips thrilled through me, even then, in my mind, I saw the murderous pistol in her hand, as I had seen it months ago. Indeed, it almost seemed that she divined my thoughts, for she drew swiftly back and looked at me with haggard eyes. "Peter," she whispered, "what is it? What is it?" "Oh, Charmian," said I, over and over again, "I love you, I love you." And I kissed her appealing eyes, and stayed her questioning lips with my kisses. "I love you more than my life, more than honor, more than my soul. And because I so love you, to night you must leave me." "Leave you? Ah, no, Peter, no, no, I am your wife. I must stay with you, to suffer and share your troubles and dangers. It is my right, my privilege. Let us go away together now, anywhere, anywhere, only let us be together, my husband." "Don't!" I cried. "Don't! Do you think it is so easy to remain here without you, to lose you so soon, so very soon? If I only loved you a little less! Ah, don't you see, before this week is out my description will be all over England. We should be caught, and you would have to stand beside me in a court of justice and face the shame of it. Dear love, it would be my pride, Peter, to face them all, to clasp this dear hand in mine." "Never!" I cried, clenching my fists. "Never! You must leave me. No one must know Charmian Brown ever existed. You must go." "Hush!" she whispered, clasping me tighter. "Listen, some one is coming." Away to the right we could hear the leaves rustling, as though a strong wind passed through them. A light flickered and went out, flickered again, and a voice hailed faintly, "Hallo!" "Come," said Charmian, clasping my hand, "let us go and meet him." "No, Charmian, no, I must see this man alone. You must leave here to night, now. You can catch the London mail at the cross roads. Go to Blackheath, to Sir Richard Anstruther. He is my friend. Tell him everything." She was down at my feet, and had caught my hand to her bosom. "I can't," she cried. "I can't go and leave you here alone. I have loved you so, from the very first. It seems that each day my love has grown until it is a part of me. Oh, Peter, don't send me away from you. It will kill me, I think." "Better that than the shame of prison!" I exclaimed, and while I spoke I lifted her in my arms. "Oh, I am proud, proud to have won such a love as yours. Let me try to be worthy of it. Good bye, my beloved." And so I kissed her, and would have turned away, but her arms clung about me. "Oh, Peter!" she sobbed, "if you must go, if you will go, call me your wife, just once, Peter." The hovering light was much nearer now, and the rustle of leaves louder, as I stooped above her cold hands and kissed their trembling fingers. "Some day," said I, "some day, if there is a just God in heaven, we shall meet again, perhaps soon, perhaps late. Until then, let us dream of that glorious, golden some day. But now, farewell, O beloved wife." With a broken cry she drew my head down upon her breast and clasped it there, while her tears mingled with her kisses, and so, crying my name, she turned and was lost among the leaves. Chapter 43 How I Set Out to Face My Destiny. The pallid moon shone down pitilessly upon the dead white face that stared up at me through its grime and blood, with the same half tolerant, half amused contempt of me that it had worn in life. The drawn lips seemed to mock me, and the clenched fists to defy me still, so that I shivered, and turned to watch the oncoming light that danced like a will-o'-the-wisp among the shadows. Presently it stopped, and a voice hailed once more, "Hallo!" "Hallo!" I called back. "This way, this way." In a little while I saw the figure of a man, whom I at once recognized as the one-time postilion, bearing the lanthorn of a chaise, and as he approached it struck me that this meeting was very much like our first, save for him who lay in the shadows, staring up at me with unwinking eyes. "So ho!" exclaimed the postilion as he came up, raising his lanthorn that he might view me better. "It is you again, is it?" "Yes," I nodded. "Well, I don't like it," he grumbled. "A meeting of each other again like this, in this 'ere ghastly place. No, I don't like it. Too much like the last time to be nat'ral, and, as you know, I can't bide onnaturalness. If I was to ax you where my master was, like as not you'd tell me 'e was " "Here," said I, and, moving aside, pointed to the shadow. The postilion stepped nearer, lowering his lanthorn, and staggered blindly backward. "Lord!" he whimpered. "Lord love me!" and stood staring, with a dropped jaw. "Where is your chaise?" "Up yonder in the lane," he mumbled, his eyes still fixed. "Then help me to carry him there." "No, no, I dursn't touch it, I cannot not me, not me!" "I think you will," said I, and took the pistol from my pocket. "Ain't one enough for to night?" he muttered. "Put it away, I'll come. I'll do it. Put it away." So I dropped the weapon back into my pocket, while the postilion, shivering violently, stooped with me above the inanimate figure, and, with our limp burden between us, we staggered and stumbled up the path and along the lane to where stood a light travelling chaise. "'E ain't likely to come to this time, I'm thinkin'," said the postilion, mopping the sweat from his brow, and grinning with pallid lips, after we'd got our burden into the vehicle. "No, 'e ain't likely to wake up no more, nor yet curse my 'ead off this side o' Jordan." "No," I answered, beginning to unwind my neckcloth. "Nor it ain't no good to go abandonin' and a bindin' 'im up like ye did last time." "No," I said, "no." And, stepping into the chaise, I muffled that disfigured face in my neckcloth, having done which, I closed the door. "What now?" inquired the postilion. "Now you can drive us to Cranbrook." "What, be you a comin' too?" "Yes," I nodded. "Yes, I am coming too." "Lord love me!" he exclaimed, and a moment later I heard him chirruping to his horses. The whip cracked and the chaise lurched forward. Whether he had some wild notion that I might attempt to descend and make my escape before we reached our destination, I cannot say, but he drove at a furious pace, taking corners at reckless speed, so the chaise lurched and swayed most violently, and more than once I was compelled to hold that awful figure down upon the seat before me, lest it should slide to the floor. On we sped, past hedge and tree, by field and lonely wood, and ever in my ears was the whir of the wheels, the drumming of hoofs, and the crack of the whip, and ever the flitting moonbeams danced across that muffled face, until it seemed that the features writhed and gibed at me beneath the folds of the neckerchief. And so at last came lights and houses, and the sound of excited voices, as we pulled up before the posting house at Cranbrook. Looking from the window, I saw a ring of faces, with eyes that gleamed in the light of the lanthorns, and every eye was fixed on me, and every foot gave back a step as I descended from the chaise. And while I stood there, the postilion came, with two white-faced ostlers, who between them bore a heavy burden through the crowd, stumbling awkwardly as they went, and as men saw what they were carrying, there came a low, deep sound, wordless, inarticulate, yet full of menace. But above this murmur a voice rose. I saw the postilion push his way to the steps of the inn, and turn there, with hands clenched and raised above his head. "My master, Sir Maurice Vibart, is killed, shot to death, murdered down there in the 'aunted 'Oller," he cried. "And if you axes me who done it, I says to you, 'e did, so 'elp me God!" And, speaking, he raised his whip and pointed at me. Once more there rose that inarticulate sound of menace, and once more all eyes were fixed upon me. "You were a fine gentleman," said a voice. "And so gay and light-hearted," said another. "Ay, a generous and open-handed gentleman," said a third. At every moment the murmur swelled and grew more threatening. Fists were clenched and sticks flourished, so that instinctively I set my back against the chaise, for it seemed that they lacked only some one to take the initiative ere they fell upon me. The postilion saw this too, for with a shout he sprang forward, his whip upraised. But as he did so the crowd was burst asunder, he was caught by a mighty arm, and Black George stood beside me, his eyes glowing, his fists clenched, and his hair and beard bristling. "Stand back, you chaps!" he growled. "Stand back, or I'll 'urt some on ye. Be ye all a lot o' dogs set on worry ones all alone?" And then he said, turning to me, "What be the matter with the fools, Peter?" "Matter!" cried the Postilion. "Murder be the matter. My master be murdered, shot to death, and there stands the man as done it." "Murder!" cried George, in an altered voice. "Murder!" Now, as he spoke, the crowd parted, and 4 ostlers appeared, bearing a hurdle between them, and on the hurdle lay a figure, an elegant figure whose head and face were still muffled in my neckerchief. I saw George start, and like a flash his glance came round to my bare throat, and dismay was in his eyes. "Peter?" he murmured. Then he laughed suddenly, and clapped his hand down upon my shoulder. "Look 'ee, you chaps," he cried, facing the crowd, "this is my friend Peter, an honest man, and no murderer, as he will tell you hisself. This is my friend, as I'd go bail for my life to be a true man. Speak up, Peter, and tell 'em that you'm an honest man, and no murderer." But I shook my head. "Oh, Peter!" he whispered, "speak, speak!" "Not here, George," I answered. "It would be of no avail. Besides, I can say nothing to clear myself." "Nothin', Peter?" "Nothing, George. This man was shot and killed in the Hollow. I found him lying dead. I found the empty pistol, and the Postilion yonder found me standing over the body. That's all I have to tell." "Peter," said he, speaking hurriedly beneath his breath. "Oh, Peter, let's run for it. 'Twould be main easy for the likes o' you and me." "No, George," I answered, "it would be worse than useless. But one thing I do ask of you, you who know me so much better than most, and it is that you will bid me good by, and take my hand once more, George, here, before all the eyes that look upon me as a murderer." And, before I had finished, he had hold of my hand in both of his, nay, had thrown one great arm protectingly about me. "Why, Peter," he began in a strangely cracked voice, "oh, man as I love, never think as I'd believe their lies, and, Peter, such fighters as you and me, a match for double their number. Let's make a bolt for it. Ecod, I want to hit somebody. Never doubt me, Peter, your friend, and they'd go over like skittles, Peter." The crowd, which had swelled momentarily, surged, opened, and a man on horseback pushed his way toward me, a man in some disorder of dress, as though he had clothed himself in a hurry. Rough hands were now laid upon me. I saw George's fist raised threateningly, but caught it in my grasp. "Good by," said I. "Good by, George, and don't look so downcast, man." But we were forced apart, and I was pushed and pulled and hustled away through a crowd of faces whose eyes damned me wherever I looked, along panelled passageways, into a long, dim room, where sat the gentleman I had seen on the horse, busily tying his cravat, to whom I delivered up the pistol, and answered divers questions as well as I might, and by whom, after much jotting of notes and memoranda, I was delivered over to 4 burly fellows, who, with deep gravity, and a grip much tighter than was necessary, once more led me out into the moonlit street, where were people who pressed forward to stare into my face, and people who leaned out of windows to stare down upon my head, and many more who followed at my heels. And thus, in much estate, I ascended a flight of worn stone steps into the churchyard, and so, by way of tombs and graves, came at last to the great square church tower, into which I was incontinently thrust, and there very securely locked up. End of How I Set Out to Face My Destiny.